Hi, hello everyone. Today's story is Tyrannosaurus Drip by Julia Donaldson. I know some of you have really enjoyed this story before and I hope you enjoy it again. It's a bit of a long story. Hopefully you can see some of the pictures and you can hear me. In the swamp beside the river where the land was thick with veg, lived a herd of duck-billed dinosaurs who roamed the water's edge. And they hooted up with rivers, and they hooted up with reeds, and they hooted up with bellyfuls of juicy water weeds. Now across the rushing river, on a hill the other side, lived a mean tyrannosaurus with his grim and grisly bride. And they shouted up with hunting, and they shouted up with wars, and they shouted up with bellyfuls of duck-billed dinosaurs. But the two tyrannosauruses, so grisly, mean and grim, couldn't catch the duck-billed dinosaurs because they couldn't swim. And they muttered, "Down with water," and they muttered, "Down with wet," and they muttered, "What a shame that bridges aren't invented yet." Now little Companathus, but for short we'll call her Comp, found a duckbill egg and stole it from the nest beside the swamp. And she swam with it, and she ran with it, and she murmured, "Clever me!" And won't the baby Comps be thrilled with a duck-bill egg for tea? She dropped the egg in terror and went running for her life from the mean Tyrannosaurus and his grim and grisly wife. Now the mother tea had great big jaws and great enormous legs, but her brain was rather little, and she couldn't count her eggs. And she sang, "Hatch out, my terrors, with your scaly little tails, and your spiky little toothies, and your scary little nails." Out hatched the babies, 1 and 2, as perfect as could be. But Mother T was horrified at baby number 3. And she grumbled, "He looks weedy." And she grumbled, "He looks weak." And she grumbled, "What long arms, and look at his mouth like a beak." "He just needs feeding up," said Dad, and gave the babe some meat. The first 2 gulped and guzzled, but the third refused to eat. And he said, "I'm really sorry." And he said, "I simply can't." And he said, "This meat looks horrible. I'd rather eat a plant." "A plant," yelled Mum in horror, and Dad said, "Get a grip." His sisters found a name for him, Tyrannosaurus Drip. And they shouted, "Up with hunting!" And they shouted, "Up with wars!" And they shouted, "Up with bellyfuls of duck-billed dinosaurs." Poor Tyrannosaurus Drip tried hard to sing along, but the others yelled, "You silly Drip, you've got the words all wrong." For he hooted, "Down with hunting!" And he hooted, "Down with war!" And he hooted, "Down with bellyfuls of duck-billed dinosaurs." Drip's sister soon grew big enough to hunt with Mum and Dad, but they turned to Drip and told him, "You're not fierce enough to come." And he cried, "They've gone without me." And he cried, "Accaday." And he cried, "This doesn't feel like home. I'm going to run away." So he ran off to the water where he saw a lovely sight, a herd of duck-billed dinosaurs all hooting with delight. And they hooted up with rivers, and they hooted up with reeds, and they hooted up with bellyfuls of juicy water weeds. As he stood there at the bank, a sudden urge took hold of him, and he jumped into the water and discovered he could swim. And the duckbills came to greet him by the rushing river's edge, and they hooted, "Nice to see you," and they hooted, "Have some veg." And Drip was delighted that they hadn't run away, ate bellyfuls of water weeds, and played with them all day. Then he gazed into the river and asked them, "Who, oh who, is that creature in the water?" And they laughed and said, "That's you." And he can see his reflection in the water. That night the lightning crackled and the storm blew down a tree, and it fell across the river, and the T's cried out, "Yippee!" And they shouted, "Up with hunting!" And they shouted, "Up with war!" And they shouted, "Up with bellyfuls of duck-billed dinosaur." The tree blown down. See that? Drip's sister stepped onto the bridge and then began to frown, for the three of them saw in front of them stood Drip, who yelled, "Look! Look out! Look down!" And they looked into the water, and they each let out a yelp, and they cried, "Water monsters!" And the other one cried, "Help!" Their mother scolded, "Nonsense!" and she joined them on the tree, and she took one look into the water and exclaimed, "Goodness gracious me!" The three of them stood trembling, and Dad said, "Get a grip. You're all as drippy as Tyrannosaurus Drip." He strode onto the bridge and scoffed, "I bet there's nothing there." Then he looked into the water and jumped up in the air. What can he see in the water? And how the duckbills hooted, and they landed with a crash, and the tree bridge broke, and 4 Tyrannosaurus went splash. And spluttering and clinging to the branches of the tree, they went whooshing down the waterfall and all the way to sea. And the duckbills hooted happily. They hooted, "Hip, hip, hooray!" for the heroic one and only Duckbill Drip. Hip, hip for Drip, hooray! Woohoo! Well, I hope you enjoyed today's story, and I'll see you again. Bye.